Hey guys, tonight we're going to see what it was really like to be a Viking servant, and more. You're not going to like this job. The hours are awful, the dress code is scratchy, and the morning routine. Let's just say, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're already awake before the chickens. That would be impressive, if it wasn't also every single day. You don't wake gently. There's no soft blanket or sleepy stretch. You jolt up because you're freezing. Again, the straw under your thin wool blanket has flattened into something more like packed leaves. Your nose stings from the smoky air, and you've got that familiar taste of soot on the back of your throat. The longhouse is quiet, except for the snuffling of pigs in the next room and the distant shifting of your master-ass family stirring. You stretch your back, which pops like old wood, and try to wiggle your toes. They're stiff, and not in a poetic way, just numb. Winter does that. Everything is cold and slightly damp, including you. You roll out of your sleeping corner near the door, not because it's time, but because it's never not time. The moment your eyes open, work begins. You shove your feet into half-frozen leather shoes that might technically be yours, but used to belong to someone more important. You don't get boots, you get The tunic you wear is too short at the wrist and still smells faintly of goat urine, which makes sense, because you spend most mornings shoveling it. You open the door to the outside world, and the cold bites hard. Wind pushes straight through the seams in your clothes. Your breath ghosts instantly, and the air smells like ash, wet wool, and the sharp temps of manure. Welcome to your day. First, the animals. Always, the animals. You head to the pen, and the goats immediately start yelling like you're late, which you are, by their standards. They press against the gate, bleating, stomping, arguing in that special goat way that implies you've ruined their entire week. The hay is wet. Again, the trough is frozen over. Again, you jab at the ice with a dull tool that used to be a kitchen knife, then scoop soggy feet into piles, while trying not to slip on the slush. A goat knocks over your bucket. You don't react, there's no point. You just pick it up and start again. That's what this life teaches you. Persistence, maybe, or just a quiet kind of defeat. Once the animals are fed, you tend the fire. The longhouse hearth still smolders, but barely. You coax it back to life with damp kindling and quiet prayers that the wood ice and tea soaked all the way through. Your hands are red and raw. One thumb is cracked so deep it bleeds when you bend it. You ignore it. No one's going to bring you ointment. You blow gently into the coals, and they glow, then catch. You sit there for a moment longer than you should, not because you're lazy, but because it's the only warmth you'll feel today. It smells like smoke and dried onion skin and the faint sweetness of last night's mead. Your breakfast is the same as it always is. A bowl of barley porridge, scraped from the bottom of the pot. It's chewy and gray and tastes faintly of ash. If you're lucky, there's a smear of butter, or maybe a dried berry someone dropped. You eat quickly, standing up, leaning near the hearth like you're just warming your hands, not stealing seconds of rest. No one thanks you for lighting the fire. No one notices the porridge was cooked before the rooster crowed. That's not how this works. You're a thrall. That means you belong to someone. Not metaphorically. Literally. You might have been born into it. Or maybe your parents owed a debt. Or maybe, a long time ago, someone in your village lost a fight. Doesn't matter now. You're here, and you'll stay here until someone decides otherwise. You have no wages, no rights. You don't eat first. You don't sit at the table. You sleep near the door, because if someone breaks in, they'll hit you before reaching anyone important. In a strange way, it's practical. In a stranger way, it's normal. There's no school, no calendar, no real sense of change. Just weather, seasons, and work. You know it's nearing spring when the mud starts to suck at your feet and your hands ache less in the morning. You know it's late summer when the family is louder at night, full of ale and pickling arguments. You know it is harvest time when your hands go numb from shelling barley until your fingers bleed. Life moves, but it loops. You learn the rhythm because you have to. It's the only way to endure it. Sometimes if you're quiet and quick, you catch parts of stories. Someone says the king's taxes are rising. Someone else whispers about a neighboring farm losing a child. The master's daughter hums songs to herself when she thinks no one's listening. You never repeat what you hear. It's not your place, but you remember it, because it's all you have. Stories, chores, scraps of songs, the warmth of a fire you built, the sour smell of goat breath at dawn. These become the architecture of your memory. You catch glimpses of the outside world when traders come by, which isn't often. One time a man from the east brought glass beads and talked about a city where fish were cooked in oil and people bathed indoors. Everyone laughed, not because it wasn't real, but because it might as well be magic. You almost believed him, until he sneezed and said the ocean made his bones feel like honey, whatever that meant. He gave you a boiled egg and said nothing when you scarfed it down in 2 bites. You still think about that egg sometimes, mostly how warm it was. You don't think about escape. That's not how you survive this life. You think about finishing the next task. You think about how to get more kindling before the snow comes. You think about whether the cow will birth twins again, like last year. You think about making it to sleep without someone yelling your name. You think about silence. You crave it. Not peace, not freedom, just silence. The kind that settles after the fire dies, and before the rooster crows. The kind that doesn't require your hands or your feet or your breath, just you and stillness, and then it's gone. The master's wife is calling. She wants water for washing. The soap root is low. You grab the pail, your hands still stinging from the morning fire. You don't ask questions, you just go. You always do. You trudge to the stream because that's what you do. The pail sloshes against your leg as you walk, its wooden handle leaving a raw dent in your palm. The path is familiar mud stones, frost-hardened patches that crunch beneath your steps. You've walked it hundreds of times, enough to know where your foot will land before it does. The stream gurgles quietly beneath a thin sheen of ice. A thin mist rises from its surface like the breath of something ancient. You kneel, careful not to slip, and scoop the water. It bites your skin. It always does. You don't flinch anymore. The sky is gray and wide. The trees on the far ridge are bare and watching. No one's out here but you. That used to scare you in your first season. Now it feels like a gift. No voices, no orders, no reminders, just the sound of water, wind, and the clumsy rhythm of your breath. You lower the pail slowly, let it fill at its own pace. You don't want to spill any because if you do, you'd just have to come back. And you'd rather not make extra trips when your arms already feel like sacks of gravel. By the time you return, the longhouse is stirring. Not with warmth or welcome, just motion. The eldest son is sharpening a knife. The younger children are fighting over a boot. Someone yells about missing wool. You slide past them like smoke, invisible, carrying the water toward the hearth, where the mistress of the house waits. She doesn't look at you. She just points to the basin and walks away. You don't mind. Acknowledgement is rare. Orders are safer. You spend the next hour hauling logs, stoking fires, fetching herbs from a bundle tied in the rafters. Everything is routine. Everything has a rhythm. That doesn't make it easy. You're always sore, always cold, always one misstep from a slap or scolding. You once dropped a clay cup and it shattered on the stone. You didn't speak for a week after that, not because anyone told you not to, but because you were afraid your voice might call attention again. You've since learned how to move without sound. Lunch is a flat cake of rye, dense enough to chew for a full minute. You wash it down with lukewarm water, though once a week, if the master's in a good mood, you get a ladle of sour ale. It tastes like old apples and vinegar, but you drink it like it's honey. Your teeth hurt, constantly, especially in the cold. You press your tongue against the sore spots and wonder if they'll fall out one day. They probably will. You're not exactly eating like royalty. Still, you keep going. There's always more to do. The goats need milking, the fences need mending, the stew pot needs scrubbing, and the stew isn't even finished yet. You ladle bones from the broth, while trying not to inhale too much steam. Your face gets red and damp from it. Your hair curls, your arms shake. Sometimes you forget what you were doing halfway through doing it. Not because you're distracted. Just because your body is so tired it forgets to send messages all the way to your head. A merchant arrives that afternoon. He's wrapped in furs, with silver rings on each finger and boots that don't leak. He smells like salt and smoke. You don't look at him directly. That's not your place. But you listen as you serve ale and wipe mud from the floor behind him. He talks of a distant port where houses are made of stone and candles burn in glass jars. Someone scoffs, calls him a liar. You don't say anything. But later, when you're alone, you whisper glass jars to yourself like it's a kind of spell. While the others drink and talk, you scrape dishes and gather crumbs from the corners of the table. You don't eat any. If you're caught, it's a beating. But you wrap a bit of crust in cloth and hide it behind the tool shed. For later, just in case. It's not stealing, it's surviving. There's a difference. At least, that's what you tell yourself. The sun starts to dip. You feel it before you see it, how the air cools again, how the chickens settle down, how the light from the hearth starts to matter more than the light from the sky. You wipe your hands on your tunic and fetch the wool blankets from storage. They're heavy and smell like old hay. You lay them out near the fire for the family, careful not to wrinkle them. No one says thank you. They never do. But someone hums a lullaby while you work, and you hum it too, under your breath. Just the tune, nothing more. As you fold the last blanket, the mistress of the house calls your name sharply, like it's an insult. You flinch, straighten up, and hurry over. She hands you a small pouch and tells you to bring it to the edge of the woods. No explanation, just go. You nod, take the pouch, and leave. It jingles faintly, herbs maybe, or beads, or coins. Not that you'd ever open it to check. The walk to the woods is quiet. The path is narrow, lined with frostbitten nettles and crooked stones. Your feet ache, but you don't slow down. You've been told not to ask questions. You've also been told not to linger. So you don't. At the marked Tretha 1, with the iron nail in the bark, you place the pouch in the hollow and walk away. Someone will collect it. Maybe a healer, maybe a priestess, maybe someone else entirely. You're not supposed to know. You're just the one who carries things. Back at the longhouse, The fire burns brighter. Shadows flicker along the beams. The family is laughing now, full from the stew you stirred and the bread you didn't touch. You slip into the corner and start washing bowls. Your hands move automatically. Water, rag, scrape, repeat. You let your mind drift. You think about the nail in the tree, the jingling pouch, the way the merchant's voice lilted when he said stone houses. You think about the crust you hid behind the tool. You hope it's still there. Sometimes, when you let yourself imagine, you wonder what it might feel like to wake up with nothing to do, to stretch, not because your back hurts, but because you can. To walk through the woods for no reason at all, just walking, just breathing. You don't dwell on it. Dreaming too hard makes the work feel heavier, but still, the thought sneaks in sometimes, like a sliver of sun between the cracks in the wall. You dry the last bowl and stack it carefully. No chips, no cracks. You put everything exactly where it belongs, then sit near the embers to warm your hands. They're red, rough, chapped. Your nails are dark with soot, but your fingertips still remember the softness of wool, the cool slip of water, the weight of the pouch in your palm. You press them together, as if trying to keep those things inside. Outside, the snow starts falling again. It falls gently, quietly, like the world is whispering. No one hears it but you. You don't get paid. Not in money, not in favors, not in promises. Payment isn't really part of the arrangement when you're a thrall. You get food, if there's enough. You get shelter, as long as you stay useful. And if you're very lucky, you get overlooked when someone's in a bad mood. That's not sarcasm. Being ignored is a kind of blessing in this world, because being noticed usually means more work, more noise, or more bruises. And no, you don't get time off. You don't have a birthday. You don't get breaks for snow, or for stories, or for whatever seasonal holiday might be happening on the calendar that only free people seem to own. You've been told, more than once, that it's your honor to serve. You've also been told to hurry up. The message is always the same. Work harder, be grateful, and don't ask questions. You mostly obey. Mostly what you do get is repetition. Endless aching, quiet repetition, the kind that wears grooves into your bones, the kind that carves your footsteps into the dirt floor, so precisely you can find them even in the dark. You know exactly how long it takes to scoop water from the stream, how many steps it is to the woodpile, how many logs the hearth will burn before you need to stoke it again. It's muscle memory now, and it doesn't stop, not even when you're sick, not even when your hand is bandaged from slipping with the blade. You work, and you keep working, because there's nothing else. You also don't get much clothing. You have one tunic. 2. If you're extremely fortunate or someone died recently, it itches all the time, no matter how many times you wash it. The wool is thick, but not in a comforting way. It holds water like a sponge, and scratches like nettle. You patch it yourself with whatever scrap fabric you find near the loom. One sleeve is shorter than the other. Your shoes are thin. You stuff them with straw when the lining breaks, which is often. Your socks have more holes than thread, but you wear them anyway, because it's that or nothing. Sometimes you wish for boots. Not fancy ones, just something that doesn't let in the snow. You think about boots more than you think about heaven. The hierarchy here isn't complicated. At the top, the master and his wife, then the sons, then the eldest daughter, who acts like she's next in line for a crown. Below her, the younger children. Below them, the livestock. And then, at the bottom, you and the other thralls. There are 3 of you in this household, one older man who barely speaks, and a girl not much younger than you, who came from a village that burned during a raid. She doesn't remember much, just that her mother was loud and then gone. You don't talk often, but sometimes, in the hour before dawn, you sit near the fire together and don't say anything at all. It's the most peace either of you ever gets. The cows are calving soon. You can tell by the way they move. Slower, heavier, with more caution. You'll be called to help, of course. You always are. You've learned more about animal birth than most healers ever will. Not because anyone taught you, but because you were there. You were always there. Elbow deep in hay and noise, catching a slick calf with your bare hands while someone yelled instructions from a safe distance. The job is messy, but it feels more real than most things. At least the cows don't lie. You sometimes wonder what your life would have looked like if you had been born into this. If your mother had married differently, or if your father hadn't been captured, or if some noble hadn't decided to settle a debt with your name. Historians still argue whether thralls were treated more like property or more like lower-class family members. You can say from experience, definitely not family, not even close. You're closer to the ladder than the lineage. They fix the ladder when it breaks. There's a strange dignity in being at the very bottom, not pride, not honor, just the quiet knowledge that no one can really take anything from you, because you don't have anything left. You find power in small rebellions, folding a blanket with more care than expected, washing the pot until it shines, braiding the girl's hair when no one's watching. You don't get to choose where you sleep or what you wear, but you get to choose how you endure. And some days, that's enough. The eldest son once told you that the gods reward loyalty. He said it like it was advice, but it sounded more like a warning. You nodded. You always nod. But deep down, you're not sure the gods even remember you exist. You've never been to a temple. You've never offered anything but sweat. If the gods are watching, they're being very quiet about it. Still, the house prepares for a ritual soon. Not for you, of course, but for someone important. You can feel the change in the air. The mood is different. People whisper more. The mistress has been sorting linens, and someone scrubbed the benches with vinegar yesterday, which only happens when visitors are expected or something sacred is approaching. You're not told anything directly, you just notice. That's your job. To notice things, to stay one step ahead, and to be nowhere in sight when the family wants space. The other thrall, the older one, says there's a death coming. He says he felt it in his knee, which sounds ridiculous until you remember. He predicted a miscarriage last spring just from the sound of a raven. He says someone will be buried with honor. You ask who, and he shrugs. Doesn't matter. We'll still do the lifting. He's probably right. The lifting is always yours. That evening, as you scrub soot from the hearthstones, the girl asks what it's like outside the village. You pause. You've seen glimpses. Caravans passing, traders resting, a ship once, in the distance, but never up close. Do you think for a moment? Then you tell her softly. It smells different. She nods, like she understands. Even if she doesn't, you both sit there for a while, listening to the wind tap against the door, wondering what else the world might smell like if you ever got to leave. Winter isn't coming. It's already here. It arrived with a silence you've grown to recognize, that thick, muffled stillness that comes when snow has blanketed the roofs, weighed down the trees, and swallowed the road. The world feels smaller in winter. The sky hangs lower. The breath from your mouth floats slower. Even time itself moves with caution, like it's afraid of slipping on the ice. You wake to a draft so sharp it feels like someone running a knife down your spine. The doorframe shrinks in the cold, and the gap lets in a breeze that cuts straight through your tunic. Your hands are already stiff before you sit up. You curl them into fists, then slowly uncurl your fingers. One by one, like a reluctant flower, your breath fogs in front of your face. You try to move quickly, but it's hard when your joints feel like they're stuffed with stones. The floor is hard, the air is harder. Your shoes are frozen, not metaphorically, literally. The leather cracks slightly as you shove your foot in. You expect it now. Just like you expect the way your toes will go numb in 10 minutes, and how they'll sting back to life the moment you're near the fire later. You dress in layers, though calling them layers is generous. A tunic, a second tunic, and a ragged cloak that smells faintly of pickled fish. You used to flinch at the smell. Now it's just background noise. Stepping outside feels like stepping into punishment. The wind howls down from the hills, slipping under your clothes, biting the back of your neck. Snow crunches underfoot, a sound sharp enough to wake the dogs. They bark once, then settle again, used to your movements. The animals in the barn are restless. Their breath fogs the air in steady little plumes, and the goats shiver against one another like miserable furry rocks. You begin your chores. No one tells you to. No one has to. You break the ice on the trough with a rock, using the same rhythm you always do. 3 sharp hit, scoop dump, repeat. Your hands burn from the cold, but you move fast. If you hesitate, the water refreezes before you're done. You've learned that lesson more than once. Your fingertips are cracked, red, and look slightly blue around the nails. You press them into your armpits when no one's looking, just to feel something close to warmth. It works. Barely. Inside, the fire must be kept alive at all costs. That's your next job. The hearth isn't just for cooking. It's the heart of the house. If it goes out, everything else goes with it. The food, the heat, the comfort. You scrape the ashes aside, feed it new wood, blow gently until the coals glow orange. You stay low to the floor. The smoke rises. The heat stays down. It's the only time you feel something close to safe. The mistress orders you to air out the bedding, which is a joke in this weather. You drag heavy woolen blankets outside, pin them to the line, and hope they don't freeze solid before the wind shakes the dust from them. Your nose runs. You sniff. There's no point in wiping it. Your sleeve is already crusted with ash and snot. One of the children throws a snowball at your back. You don't flinch. You've learned it's better not to react. They get bored faster that way. Meals get smaller in winter. The stew stretches further, the bread thinner, the pickled fish saltier. You eat the ends, the crusts, the parts no one else wants. But you eat. That's what matters. Once, a visiting merchant told a story about a village where thralls weren't fed in winter. He said they froze in barns, and no one noticed until the thaw. Everyone laughed. You didn't. You've seen what it looks like when someone's lips turn gray. It's not a joke. You've been here long enough to know winter has its own rhythm, not just chores. Emotions. The family grows short-tempered. The walls feel tighter. Arguments start over nothing. A misplaced needle, a dropped ladle. The older son sulks near the fire, sharpening a knife for hours, not because he needs to, but because the sound soothes him. The mistress snaps orders with an edge she usually keeps buried. The master disappears for days to visit neighbors and check on trade. No one says it, but you all know. The house breathes differently in winter. You take comfort in patterns. The same steps across the snow-packed yard. The same dull weight of the water pail. The same hiss of fire on wet logs. It grounds you. It makes the time feel less like drifting and more like surviving. You count days by the number of loaves baked, by how many times the old man coughs in the night, by how many times your fingers bleed when chopping wood. There's no calendar. This is your clock now. Historians still argue whether Viking thralls were allowed to earn their freedom. Some say yes, that with good behavior and years of labor, you might be granted release. Others say it was rare, more myth than method. You don't know which is true. No one talks about it here. No one promises anything. You once asked the older thrall, the quiet one, if he knew anyone who got out. He just laughed. Not meanly, not bitterly, just softly, like it was a question no one had asked him in years. You don't let yourself hope for freedom. Not really, but you imagine it sometimes. Not a parade, not a reward. Just a day where no one tells you what to do, where you can walk into the forest and sit without counting how long it takes, where you can eat until you're full, where you can sleep past dawn. You imagine a day where your hands aren't cracked, where your shoulders don't ache, where you're not cold all the time. You return to the fire. You sit close, careful not to seem too comfortable. You mend a sleeve with stiff fingers and rough twine, threading the needle through wool that resists every pull. Your stitches are ugly, but they hold. The mistress will be angry if they don't. You finish just as she enters, glancing at your work but saying nothing. She doesn't have to. You know she saw it. You know it's good enough. Outside, the snow keeps falling. Thick now, steady, like the sky is determined to bury everything. You stare at it through the cracks in the wood, watching it pile up. You think about how deep it will be by morning. You think about how heavy it gets when it settles on the roof. You think about how, if it gets much worse, the door will freeze shut, and you'll have to dig your way out. Again, you close your eyes, just for a moment, and listen to the sound of the wind. It rattles the shutters gently, not angry, just present, like a lullaby you've heard your whole life. You curl your fingers tighter around the thread in your lap, and let the quiet fill your chest. You don't get paid, but tonight, at least, you're warm. The fire pops. You don't flinch. You've learned the difference between sounds that require your attention and ones that don't. Occasional spark from the hearth means it's alive, working, burning through the logs you split this morning with an axe that wobbles at the handle. The longhouse smells of pine smoke, wet wool, and meat boiled beyond recognition. It's not pleasant, but it's home, in the strangest way. From your usual place near the door, you can hear everything. You always can. The conversations don't include you, but they wrap around you like the smoke, constant, invisible, inescapable. The mistress talks about her sister's impending marriage, her voice sharp with judgment and something sour. The older son complains about the quality of the barley, as if it's the barley's fault for growing badly in frozen soil. The younger daughter practices reciting lines of poetry under her breath, stumbling and correcting herself, hoping someone notices. No one does. You're not supposed to listen, but you do. Not to gossip, not to tattle, just to keep ahead of the next command. If someone mentions needing extra firewood, you remember it. If someone talks about a guest arriving tomorrow, you prepare the guest's blanket before you're asked. It's not magic. It's survival. Staying ahead means fewer surprises. Surprises are bad for people like you. You learn to read moods before words. A bowl set down too hard means someone's in a temper. A furrowed brow at dawn means the stew is too thin last night. A pause before someone speaks means they're about to ask you to do something they know is unpleasant. You keep track of these things, not because anyone told you to, but because you've learned it's safer that way. This morning, something's different. The house is unusually quiet. There's a weight in the air, heavier than just the smoke. The older son speaks in hushed tones. The mistress walks slowly, her eyes wet and unfocused. You notice a bundle of linens near the hearth, fresh, white, untouched, and someone has laid a sprig of juniper across the threshold. You've seen this before. Not often, but enough to know. Someone in the family is dying. You don't know who. No one tells you. No one needs to. Death announces itself. Not with wailing or ceremony, but with little shifts. A door creaks more than usual. A stool is moved slightly off-center. People walk slower, talk softer, touch their own faces without realizing it. You sweep the floor carefully, trying not to disturb whatever fragile thread is holding the house together. In the back room, the master is lying down. He's not moving. You can't see him, but you hear the others taking turns sitting beside him, whispering, weeping quietly when they think no one can hear. You won't be asked to, but you still fetch water, heat stones for warmth, brew herbs into tea. It's not because they ask. It's because you know what's needed. That's the rule of your life. Anticipate, assist, vanish. The mistress tells you to bring out the good cloth, the one embroidered with blue thread. You know exactly where it is. You've mended its corners, folded it each month, aired it carefully on dry days. You lay it out on the bench and she inspects it with trembling fingers. She doesn't say thank you. You didn't expect her to, but she doesn't frown either. That's something. Later, she asks for help preparing a tincture. You help without a word. Mash the herbs, boil the water, stir without clinking the spoon. She doesn't look at you, but her hands move slower than usual. At one point, her fingers tremble, and a few drops spill. You mop them up quickly and offer the cloth back, still silent. For the first time in years, she meets your eyes, just for a second, and then it's gone. By evening, the longhouse is crowded. Relatives arrive from neighboring farms, their boots caked with snow, their faces pale with grief. You don't speak to them, you just make room. You serve ale, lay out food, stoke the fire hotter than it's been in weeks. The warmth helps keep the silence at bay. Not entirely, but enough. The older thrall leans close and whispers. It's the old man, finally going. You nod. You figured as much. He was slow to rise last week. His hands shook during mealtime. He stared into the fire too long, like he was listening to something far away. You didn't speak to him directly, but you carried his bowl carefully, placed his shoes by the fire without being asked. Small kindnesses, the only kind you're allowed to give. Night falls, the wind rattles, the shutters. Inside, the mood has settled into something like reverence. No wailing, no speeches, just the quiet knowledge that someone is crossing from this world into whatever comes next. You don't know what you believe. The gods are distant figures too. I have in rituals you're not part of, praised in meals you don't eat. Still, you nod respectfully when someone mentions Valhalla. It seems like the polite thing to do. When the master's breath finally stops, no one says the word, but everyone knows. Someone begins humming a funeral song. Soft, low, almost a whisper. Others join in. You keep your head down and continue wiping the table. The cloth moves in steady circles beneath your hand. You scrub harder than necessary. Not because the table is dirty, but because your chest feels tight, and you're not sure what else to do with your hands. They'll prepare the body tomorrow. Not you. That's for the family and the priest. But you'll carry the supplies. You'll help clean. You'll sweep the path where they walk. You always do. It's strange how you can be so close to a life, and still completely outside it. Their meals, their moods. But when it comes to grief, you become invisible again. Grief, like celebration, belongs to the free. Still, you feel it. You feel it in the way the air changes, in the weight behind each footstep, in the sudden stillness of the children, who somehow understand without being told. You feel it in your own bones, too. A strange ache that isn't hunger or cold or exhaustion, just a quiet sadness, one you're not quite allowed to name. You finish your tasks. You pour water over the fire to dim it slightly, just enough to let the room fall into a kind of shadowed stillness. The family gathers near the hearth. They speak quietly. You return to your spot near the door. You curl your feet under your cloak. You close your eyes. Someone is gone. And though you weren't supposed to know them, not really, you carry a piece of them anyway. Because you watched them grow old. Because you made their tea. Because you noticed when their hands began to tremble. And because, in your quiet way, you were always there. You don't cry. Not because you're hardened or cold, but because the moment doesn't belong to you. It belongs to them. The family, the free, the named. Your role now is the same as always. Carry, clean, prepare, disappear. You wake before the others, light the fire, and begin boiling water for the washing. The master's body will need to be cleaned before the burial. You are not invited to help directly. That task goes to the eldest son and a distant cousin, who claims some priestly training. But you set the basin by the hearth and lay out clean linen like someone who has done this before. There's a different kind of silence today. Not just grief, reverence. A hush that stretches between footsteps thickens under beams. You move more slowly, more carefully, as if afraid to bump into something sacred. Everyone does. The children don't fight. The mistress speaks only when necessary, and her voice is quieter than usual. Even the dogs seem subdued, curled up, tight in corners, tails flicking like they understand that something larger than them has shifted. You're handed a list of tasks, not written. Of course, few here write anything, but rattled off quickly by the daughter between bites of dry bread, salt mead, cedarwood shavings. Fetch them, prepare the path, mend the wagon. You don't argue, you nod and set off. That's what you do. That's what you've always done. The burial won't happen right away. The family wants a ship funeral, or at least something that echoes one. They won't burn the whole vessel. That kind of extravagance is rare, even here. But the master will be laid in a small carved boat, one large enough to cradle his body and his memory. You'll help haul it from the storehouse. It has been waiting there for years. Long enough for spiders to nest in the joints and moss to gather along the frame. You've walked past it 100 times and never thought twice. Now, it's at the center of everything. The boat is heavier than it looks. You and the older thrall lift one end, while the eldest son and a neighbor strain at the other. You don't speak during the carry. Your breath fogs the air in soft puffs, and the snow crunches beneath your feet. Each step leaves a shallow groove behind, like a memory pressed into ice. The boat creaks slightly as it shifts, not quite complaining, just acknowledging that it's awake now, that it has a purpose. Again, you set it down beside the burial site, a ridge near the forest, overlooking the fjord. The view is beautiful in a quiet, bleak way. Sparse trees, gray sky, the kind of cold that hums in your teeth. The family will wrap the master in wool, place tokens of his life around him. A knife, a carved spoon, a bit of silver. You helped polish that silver this morning, careful not to scratch it, though you doubt he ever used it himself. It's symbolic. Everything is, these days. You wonder what they'll say about him, not out loud, just privately. In those moments between shoveling snow and fetching cloth, you think about the way he used to sit at the head of the table, chewing slowly, always the last to finish. About how he mumbled to himself when he thought no one was listening. About how he once handed you a slice of apple, silently, without making eye contact. During a winter when the apples were meant only for the family, it wasn't kindness, exactly, but it also wasn't nothing. The mistress gives you a bundle of herbs to burn. She doesn't explain what they're for, but you've seen enough ceremonies to know. It's for the smell, for the blessing, for the air between the living and the dead. You light them carefully, let them smolder in a clay bowl, and carry it to the edge of the gravesite. The smoke curls up like thin fingers, vanishing into the gray sky. You watch it for a moment longer than you should, just long enough to feel your eyes sting. That evening, the family gathers for a private vigil. You're not included. You and the other thralls eat in the outer room. Stew and hard bread, same as always. But the mood is different, quieter. Even the older thrall chews more slowly. The younger girl doesn't ask questions tonight. No one does. You eat in silence, listening to the muffled chanting coming from the inner room. It's not melodic, more a rhythm of syllables repeated again and again, like the creaking of a boat in waves. You step outside for a breath of air. It's snowing again. Thin flakes that disappear the moment they touch your skin. You stand near the barn, wrapped in your cloak, watching the faint outline of the burial boat in the distance. It's just wood, just shape, but it holds something now. Memory, weight, story. You wonder what will happen to it after the ceremony, whether it will be burned or buried or forgotten, whether someone else will be placed in it someday, whether, one day, it might be you. You're not supposed to think like that. Thralls don't get boats. Thralls don't get ceremony. At best, they get a shallow grave behind the tool shed, marked with a stone no one carves. You don't resent it, not really. You just notice. You notice how much space one person can take up in death, and how little you're allowed to take in life. You return to your mat near the fire. Your muscles ache from hauling, but it's the kind of ache that lets you sleep, the kind that tells you the work is done, at least for now. You listen to the family murmuring behind the wall. You imagine the flicker of their candlelight, the hush of woolen sleeves brushing wood, the soft clink of ritual cups, and you imagine the master, lying still in that little boat, his face folded into shadow, his hands resting over his chest like he's holding something you can't see. You don't cry, but you don't sleep right away, either. The next morning, you're hauling the master's body. No ceremony, no announcement, just a nod from the eldest son. And suddenly you're gripping the rope handles of the funeral sledge, sinking shin-deep into snow. The body lies wrapped in wool and linen, tucked tightly in the little carved boat you carried the day before. His face is covered, his hands folded. He looks small now, which feels strange, given how large his presence always seemed in life. Always looming in doorways, always the last voice heard in a conversation. Now, he's silent, light still. The path to the burial site is longer than you remember, or maybe it just feels longer because the weight of the sledge is uneven. You and the older thrall walk at the front, backs bent, boots sliding on the frost-glazed track. Behind you, the family walks in quiet procession. The mistress clutches a cloth to her mouth. The daughter carries a bowl of incense. The eldest son walks with a straight back and a clenched jaw, trying to look like the man of the house now. Though his hands keep curling into nervous fists, you keep your head down. Focus on the snow. The crunch of it, the way it packs under your foot, then gives slightly, the way your breath fogs forward, then drifts sideways in the wind. The procession winds between frost-covered trees, and every so often, someone murmurs a prayer, a few syllables, to Odin, or to Freya. You don't join in, not because you don't believe, but because it's not your place to speak during the sacred. There's a moment, near the bend in the trail, where the sledge catches on a root. The boat lurches slightly. You feel it shudder through the rope. One of the sons gasps. The mistress clutches at the bowl. The daughter drops a small token. She was holding a coin, maybe, or a carved bead, and it vanishes into the snow. No one stops to pick it up. You keep walking, so does everyone else, because that's how this works. The dead move forward, and the living follow. When you reach the site, the family gathers in a semicircle. You and the other thrall stay back, not too far, just enough to be forgotten. You lower the sledge, step away, and wait. The wind whistles through the trees. Someone begins to speak. The cousin with the priestly voice, and his words float in the air like cold breath. He speaks of legacy, and honor, and the passage of souls. You catch only fragments. Most of it isn't for you. Still, you watch. You always watch. The boat is lowered into the shallow grave. Offerings are placed around the body. Mead, bread, a worn cloak, the master's favorite knife. The daughter presses something into the folds of the linen, a lock of hair, maybe, or a scrap of writing. The mistress kneels beside the grave, her fingers brushing the edge of the boat like she's afraid to let go. Then the cousin lights the kindling, not to burn the whole thing, just enough to send smoke upward, toward whatever sky the soul might travel to. The flame crackles quietly, smoke curling around the mound like a second funeral shroud. The family watches it burn, No one cries, no one moves. Even the children are still wrapped in furs too large for them, their cheeks red with wind. You feel the heat from where you stand, briefly, fleetingly, and then it fades. They begin to fill the grave. You're handed a spade. Not asked. Handed. You take it without a word. You've done worse tasks. The snow is shoveled in with frozen dirt, layering slowly over the carved wood. The linen, the memories. You don't look at what you're covering. You just work. Steady, quiet, efficient. The rhythm of the spade is almost meditative. Lift, drop, pack, repeat the others, take turns. Even the mistress helps, though her arms shake. You notice? You don't mention it. When the last handful is dropped, the cousin murmurs something final, something that sounds rehearsed. And just like that, it's over. The family begins walking back. No feast, no singing. Just slow footsteps and steam from mouths that no longer speak. You and the other thrall stay behind for a few moments longer, collecting the tools, stamping out the last of the ceremonial fire. The burial mound looks peaceful, even under snow, like a sleeping boat waiting for the tide. You glance at it once more, then turn away. On the path back, your arms ache from digging. Your legs burn from pulling, but your mind is strangely quiet. Death doesn't shock you anymore. It simply rearranges the furniture of the household. You don't mourn, not the way they do. But you carry something, memory, effort, motion. Maybe that counts. Back at the longhouse, life resumes. Cautiously, the mistress withdraws to her room. The sons disappear into chores, louder than necessary, as if noise will make things normal again. The daughter goes silent, staring into the fire like she's waiting for it to speak. You sweep. Again. You stir the pot. Again. You fold the linens used during the preparation. Again. There's always something. Grief doesn't stop the work. If anything, it multiplies it. Later that evening, the girl thrall finds you by the barn. She's holding a piece of dried apple wrapped in cloth. You don't ask where she got it. She doesn't offer. She just tears it in half and holds one piece out. You take it. You eat together in silence, the taste sweet and sharp, like something alive. It's the first real apple you've had since summer. You chew slowly, deliberately, savoring each bite. She speaks first. Do you think he's in Valhalla? You shrugged. I think he's somewhere quiet. She nods. I hope so. You both sit there, backs against the barn wall, watching the stars emerge one by one. The air is sharp, but not unbearable. The snow crunches faintly in the distance as a goat shifts in sleep. Everything is still. Everything is paused, just for a moment. You don't know what happens after death. You're not sure anyone does, no matter how many stories they tell. But you do know this. Today, you carried something heavy, not just with your hands, with your presence. And though no one will remember that, not really, the path still bears your footsteps. The dirt still holds your weight. And somewhere beneath that burial mound, a boat sleeps. The boat is buried. The fire is out. The master's name is spoken a few times over the next few days, but less often than you'd expect. Life doesn't stop. It hesitates, falters, then finds its rhythm again. Chores return. Voices rise. The family begins talking about grain storage, weather, the price of dried fish. You go back to feeding goats, hauling water, patching clothes. Grief is not your luxury. The past folds itself away like an old wool cloak, and everyone steps back into the cold. But something lingers. Not sorrow, something quieter. The house feels rearranged. Not physically, not visibly, but in its breath, its bones. The mistress speaks less, but with more finality. The sons walk faster. The daughter, when no one's watching, touches the firewood pile like she's counting time by the logs. You watch these things. You memorize them. You turn them into a kind of map, guiding you through this new version of the same place. Then, one morning, a traveler arrives. Not a merchant. This one wears heavy furs and carries a staff marked with runes. You don't know his name. You're not told. But you hear whispers. Uppsala, temple, ceremony. The words drift through the smoke like pollen. The visitor doesn't stay long. Just long enough to leave a message and a pouch of dried mushrooms that smell like earth and rain. He walks off without looking back. The mistress nods, and the house begins preparing again. You know what this means? A pilgrimage, of sorts. Not everyone will go. Just a handful from the household, enough to be respectful, but not enough to leave the farm unguarded. You're not chosen to attend the rituals, but you are chosen to carry the offerings, which, if we're being honest, is both fitting and ironic. You don't ask what's in the bundles. Some are wrapped in fur, others tied with hemp string and sealed with wax. You can smell dried herbs, fat, maybe blood, sacred things. Strange things. You load them onto the small cart beside wheels that creak like old knees. The snow has melted slightly, making the path muddy. You wrap your feet tighter, knowing they'll still be soaked before noon. The journey to the temple site isn't short. You walk 4 hours beside the eldest son and 2 of the farmhands. They speak occasionally, mostly about the best route to avoid the marshes. You say nothing, not because you unwelcome, though you are, but because how you travel, unnoticed. You pull the cart without complaint, head down, eyes watching the ruts in the road so the wheel doesn't catch and spill something precious. The landscape changes as you go. The trees get taller. The air grows stiller. The birds are quieter here. Even the wind seems to hush itself, like it knows where you're headed. The closer you get, the more the world feels like it's holding its breath. By the time you arrive, dusk is settling in. Uppsala rises out of the woods like something half-remembered from a dream. It's not large, not in the way cities are, but it feels enormous. 3 great halls, ringed by wooden statues so tall they disappear into the fog. Their faces are worn by weather, their eyes hollowed by time, yet they seem to look right at you. Not threatening, just watching. You set down your cart and are told to wait near the outer ring of stones. You do. You don't sit. You don't speak. You just stand, your breath forming clouds that mingle with the rising incense. The other households arrive slowly. Some walk, some come on sleds, some wear heavy furs, others are barefoot. There's no uniform, just presence. The temple attendants begin their work quietly. They wear robes dyed in deep red embroidered with shapes you don't recognize. They don't smile. They don't speak to you. They take the offerings you brought without a nod. You're not offended. This isn't your ritual. You're just the carrier. The ceremonies begin at sundown. You're too far back to see much, but you can hear drums. Low, slow, deliberate. A beat that seems to echo through your ribs. You hear chanting, not in your dialect, not in any words, just sounds strung together like waves on a shore. At intervals, someone calls out. Once, twice, then silence again. There are fires, tall ones. You see smoke rising in columns. You smell burning fat, pine resin, something metallic. People sway in time with the chants. Some cry, some stand still as stone. One woman throws herself to the ground in front of a wooden statue, clutching a carved goat between her hands. You look away, not out of shame, just respect. These are sacred moments. You're not part of them, you're just nearby. You're given a place to sleep in the outer lodge. Not warm, but sheltered. You lie on straw beside 2 other thralls from other farms. You don't speak. You don't need to. The fire burns low. You close your eyes to the sound of far-off drums still echoing faintly in the night. In the morning, the air is thick with wood smoke and silence. The rituals continue. No one tells you what they're for. You don't ask, but you hear whispers. The gods were generous. A child's illness will lift. A storm was averted. The cattle will be fat this year. There's no proof, no sign, but everyone believes something changed. And that, in the end, is the point. You help load the empty cart. The offerings are gone. The wax seals melted. The cloths burned. The tokens left behind in sacred hands. You think of them now, scattered among ash and soil. You wonder what those gods do with all the gifts, whether they accept them or ignore them, or if they even notice. You don't believe blindly, but you don't not believe either. There's something here, something old, something that lingers in the stillness between breath and snow. As you leave, you look back at Uppsala once more. The statues seem taller in daylight, their carved mouths frozen in mid-thought. You nod once, you're not sure why. Maybe just because it feels right. The road home is quieter, no one talks. Everyone is tired. You walk behind the cart again, your boots caked in mud, your shoulders sore, but your thoughts are elsewhere. On the temple, the drums, the fire, on the smell of ash and pine, on the way belief hangs in the air like smoke. You breathe it in, you let it stay. You're not sure what to make of what you saw at the temple. The images linger, uninvited. The red robes, the goat carved from bone, the smoke that clung to your skin long after you left. You try not to dwell on them, but they creep into your thoughts at odd moments. While washing bowls, while splitting kindling, while stirring stew, ULLB, scraping ash from a pot, and suddenly remember the woman's voice rising in chant. Not words exactly, but something deeper than speech, something older. You weren't part of the ritual, but something about it brushed against you anyway. Back home, no one talks about the temple, not directly. It's there in the edges of conversation, in the way the mistress arranges dried herbs around the hearth, in the way the eldest son leaves offerings of oats at the base of the old tree near the edge of the property, in the way the youngest daughter stares a little longer at the full moon. When it crests over the forest line, life has returned to its rhythm, but that rhythm now carries a quiet undertone, like a drumbeat heard just below the floorboards. The older thrall tells you a story one evening, when the others are asleep. His voice is low, dry like pine bark. He says the gods at Uppsala don't always ask for sacrifice, but when they do, you give. Not just coins or herbs. Sometimes, he says, they ask for blood. You raise your eyebrows, and he shrugs. That's the old way, he says. Older than the longhouse. Older than the words we speak now. He leans back and closes his eyes. The firelight catches the edge of his face, and for a moment, he looks like one of those carved statues, half in light, half in memory. You've heard the rumors, of course. Everyone has that in the spring, when the snow melts and the rivers swell, there are ceremonies in the sacred groves, that animals are tied to trees and offered under the watch of robed men with dull blades. That sometimes, not often, but sometimes, it's not animals, You don't know what's true. You don't ask. But the whispers are there, carried in the smoke, echoed in the silence between chores. One afternoon, you're sent to gather kindling near the edge of the forest. It's a task you've done hundreds of times, but this time feels different. The trees are taller, here, older. Their bark is rough with lichen. Their roots curl like sleeping animals. You find yourself walking slower, quieter, as if not to disturb something you can't name. You pick up a few fallen branches, brush off the moss, tuck them into your bundle. Then you see it, a clearing, circular, ringed with stones. It's not large, but it's deliberate. The stones are too evenly spaced to be random. In the center, a post rises from the ground, split at the top. Around it, the remnants of something burnt. Charcoal, bone, ash. You don't step inside the ring. You just stand there, the bundle of kindling suddenly heavy in your arms. The air feels stiller here, thicker, as if even the wind is holding its breath. You don't stay long. You don't need to. You've seen enough to understand this is not a place for questions. You turn, slowly, and walk back the way you came. Feet careful, eyes lowered. The kindling rattles faintly in your arms. You don't look back. You don't have to. The silence has already followed you home. That night, you can't sleep. The fire burns low, casting long shadows across the ceiling. You stare at them, watching them shift. You try to focus on the usual comforts, the rhythm of the animals in the barn, the quiet creak of the beams, the soft exhale of the sleeping house, but your thoughts drift to the clearing, to the temple, to the stories the old man told, and the ones he didn't. Historians still argue whether these rituals were truly widespread, or if they were localized, exaggerated, misunderstood by foreign chroniclers. You've never read a scroll. You don't know the debates, but you know what you saw? You know the smell of blood under pine. You know the weight of silence. You know that something old lives in the cracks of these woods. Not evil, not cruel, just ancient. And hungry the next morning. Everything is normal again. Chores, bread, firewood, smoke. The mistress asks for more wool. The eldest son inspects the fence. The daughter complains that the goats have eaten her sandals. You patch the leather, scrub the hearth, haul the water. The rhythm continues. Steady, reassuring, but the air still carries that undertone. That low hum just beneath the surface. The memory of smoke? Not quite gone. You don't tell anyone what you saw. Not even the other thralls. Not because you're afraid, but because you know that, here, some things are meant to be carried in silence. Just like the water. Just like the dead. You work late that night, mending a broken latch with frayed rope and an iron nail you bent straight with a stone. Your fingers are numb, but your mind is calm. The physicality helps. It grounds you, reminds you that, no matter what ancient shadows lurk in the woods, someone still needs to fix the barn door. Someone still needs to churn the butter, spin the wool, shovel the dung. The sacred lives in the silence, but survival lives in repetition. As you finish, you glance toward the trees are quiet now, just outlines against the pale sky. You nod to them, almost involuntarily. A gesture of respect. Or maybe just habit. You're not sure anymore where tradition ends and instinct begins. Maybe there's no difference. Maybe all of it, the chores, the chants, the offerings, the silence, is one long, continuous thread. And you're just weaving it, one day at a time. The path to Uppsala fades into memory, but it leaves tracks inside you. Not the kind you walk, but the kind that's settled deep, where thought becomes habit. You don't dream about the rituals. You don't whisper the chants, but something in you starts paying closer attention to the air, to the way the wind moves through the trees, to the hush that follows certain words in the longhouse. You start noticing patterns, not just in chores, but in the space between them, like where the animals always huddle during a storm, or how the fire crackles differently when the mistress is angry, or the way the eldest son always sharpens his blade on the full moon. These things matter, maybe not to others, but to you, they form a map, an invisible guide to staying one step ahead of silence. A few days after your return, you're sent to the grain shed to take stock. It's part of your regular duties, though taking stock is a grand way of saying stare at sacks and count until your eyes hurt. You open the wooden door, let the smell of dry oats and old wood hit your nose, and begin the task. You work slowly, methodically, scratching notches into a beam as you go. The grain is holding up better than expected. The winter wasn't kind, but the cellar stayed dry. That counts as a win, at least by your standards. As you shift one of the sacks near the back wall, your hand brushes against something. Cold, metal, not grain. You pause, then carefully pull it free. A small pendant, shaped like a hammer. Thor's symbol. It's tied to a leather thong. Simple but clearly old. Probably dropped months ago. You hold it in your hand, feeling the weight. It's not heavy, but it feels like it remembers something. A hand, a prayer, a promise. You think of the girl thrall. She sometimes hums to herself while spinning. Little lullabies that mention thunder and stars. This could be hers. Or maybe not. Maybe it was left here for the gods, or forgotten by them. You place it on a shelf where someone might find it. you don't take it for yourself. That would be crossing a line you've never touched, not because you were afraid of punishment, but because something in your bones tells you that some things are meant to stay lost or found by someone else. You whisper a quiet phrase, not quite a prayer, and return to your counting. Later that evening, you mention it to the older thrall. While you mend a harness together in the barn, he squints at the pendant where you left it, then grunts. Could be hers, he says, meaning the girl. Could be his, he adds, meaning someone long dead. Could belong to the house. Then he shrugs, like none of the possibilities matter anymore. Some things fall out of pockets, some fall out of stories. You nod. You think about that more than you should. The next day, it's gone. You don't ask who took it. You don't mention it. You just sweep the floor under the shelf with a little more care, in case it left anything behind. It didn't. Spring is threatening to arrive. Though the snow keeps trying to argue, you feel it in the ground. The softening beneath your boots. The way the barn smells more like wet hay than frozen air. The chickens start laying more regularly. The goats become noisier. You can smell the thaw in the mornings, a sharp mix of old bark, and something green fighting its way through mud. It's the season of transition, of liminal things. Neither here nor there. You understand that better now. The family prepares for planting. That means mending tools, boiling seeds, checking the plows. You're at the center of all of it, of course. Holding things, fetching, cleaning, always in motion. The eldest son tries to repair a bent blade himself, grumbling when it keeps slipping. You step in silently, hold the iron steady while he hammers. He doesn't thank you, but he doesn't yell either. That's something. You overhear talk of guests arriving soon, cousins from a neighboring valley, here to help with planting and bring news from the coast. That means extra mouths to feed, extra beds to lay out, extra chores you'll do while others drink and gossip and shout over each other about whose ox was fatter. You prepare accordingly. You double the porridge recipe. You air out the old cloaks. You lay the good knives on the shelf so they're easier to reach. No one notices. They will if you forget. That evening, you find the girl sitting near the woodpile, braiding grass. Not for anything, just to pass time. She hands you a long strand and nods. You try, clumsily, to match her pattern. Your fingers fumble. She doesn't laugh, just watches. Then takes it back and finishes it in a quick, clean rhythm that makes you feel like time moves differently for her. She ties the end and sets it on a rock. For the wind, she says. So it doesn't forget us? You don't understand, but you don't ask. You've noticed she talks more now. Not often, not loudly, but more small things. The way the clouds looked this morning, the dream she had about geese wearing boots. You listen, because she's one of the only people who speaks to you like you're real. Sometimes, in these quiet stretches of the day, you feel something strange settle over you. Not contentment, that's too luxurious, but clarity. You know your place. You know the rhythm. You know how to move through this life without being crushed by it. And maybe that, in its own way, is enough. Still, you wonder. Not often, but sometimes. You wonder if you'll always be here. If your hands will always bear these same cracks. If your name, the one almost no one uses, will ever be spoken beyond this valley. You wonder if the gods care, if they even look down, if they ever did. And then the fire cracks. The wind shifts. Someone calls your name, or at least the sound they use instead of it, and you rise. You wipe your hands. You keep going, because that's what you do. You thought the Uppsala trip would be the most unusual thing you'd witness this year. You were wrong. A few weeks after the spring thaw begins in earnest, the house receives another visitor. Not a merchant, not a priest. This one arrives at dusk, on a horse that foams at the mouth, cloaked in dark wool, his face hidden beneath a hood, stiff with travel. He doesn't speak at first, just hands a token to the mistress. Something flat and wooden, etched with unfamiliar runes. And steps inside like he's been here before. You're told to fetch water, to prepare a place at the fire, to bring out the heavy curtains that usually stay folded in the loft. That's the first sign something strange is coming. When the curtains come out, they only do that when privacy is required. Serious privacy. The kind reserved for births, or confessions, or secrets. For 3 days, the visitor doesn't leave the longhouse. You see him only in fragments. A sleeve, a boot, the glint of a ring through the smoke. He speaks with the mistress and the eldest son in low voices. Their heads bend close. The atmosphere changes. Tension hums beneath every word. Even the animals grow quiet. You clean the hearth more carefully. You move slower, more deliberately, like the air itself is heavier, denser. On the 4th morning, the visitor disappears as quickly as he came. No goodbye. No meal. Just gone. The mistress stands in the doorway for a long time after he's gone, holding the wooden token, staring at something only she can see. Then she tells the family to prepare a journey. A long one. They're going south, she says. Toward the water. Toward a gathering. A sacrifice. The word makes the air colder. You're not invited. Of course you're not, but you are needed. To carry, to pack, to build the fire that will cook their travel bread. To mend the seams in the traveling cloaks. You don't ask questions. You've learned that too well by now. But you listen and you hear they speak of a grove, of a pool, of an offering that must be made to ensure the season's safety, of blood, not loudly, not with fear, just fact. Like they're discussing firewood or seed weight, you stir the pot with steady hands, but your heart begins to pace. The oldest thrall sees your face and nods once grimly. This is the old way, he says. Older than the masters, older than the house. You ask if it's true. He doesn't answer, just spits into the fire and walks away. Historians still argue whether these rumors are exaggerated, whether Viking ritual sacrifice was Christian chroniclers who saw devils in every drumbeat. But you've lived the rhythm, you've smelled the incense, you've seen the smoke. You know that's something real. Whatever its shape, pulses beneath all this. Whether it's the gods or just fear, it moves people, and it moves you. You begin preparing the travel gear, polishing buckles, folding cloaks, packing smoked fish, and dry bread. The younger daughter gives you a bundle of dried flowers to press into the mistress's saddlebag, to keep the road kind, she whispers. You tie them with care, you wrap them in clean linen, you place them in the very center. On the morning of departure, the family gathers outside the longhouse in solemn silence. Horses paw at the wet earth. The cart creaks under the weight of offerings wrapped in leather and wax. You're not told where they're going, only that they'll return in 7 nights, maybe 8. You're handed a list of duties to tend while they're gone. Animals, hearth garden, rows. You nod. You watch them leave, and then they're gone. The house is quiet, too quiet. You're used to silence, but this is different. Hala, like the space between 2 breaths. The girl thrall clings closer to you those days, following you from task to task, not speaking much, but never far behind. She's afraid. The first night, the fire won't catch. You try twice, 3 times, blowing into the coals until your lips sting. Finally it flares, but it feels wrong. Too fast, too loud, as if the flame itself is agitated. You feed it slowly. You watch it like it might answer a question you can't form. You sleep fitfully. Dreams come in flashes. Trees that bleed, water that hums, eyes watching you from the dark. You wake before dawn, breathless, heart kicking in your chest. The longhouse feels unfamiliar, as if, in their absence, something else has moved in. By the 3rd day, you settle into the rhythm again. Animals, water, fire, scrub the troughs, stir the mash, muck the pens. Life returns to its usual shapes, if not its usual sound. The girl sinks to herself softly. The older thrall sharpens tools, talking to no one. You keep busy. Then, on the 6th night, just before dusk, someone arrives. It's not the family. It's a boy, no older than 12, panting, eyes wild. His cloak is torn. His hands are scraped. He doesn't speak, just hands you a piece of cloth stained with something dark. A token? You don't recognize it, but you know enough to fetch the old man? He looks at it once, and nods. It's done, he says. They've made the offering. You don't ask what. You don't ask who. You help the boy wash his hands, feed him broth, lay him on a pallet near the fire. He sleeps like someone who's run too far from something too close. You sit beside him, watching the flames. That night, no one speaks. The wind rises. The rafters creak. The fire burns low. You lie on your mat and wonder what the gods demand, whether they truly watch, whether the silence that follows a ritual is satisfaction, or just waiting. In the morning, the family returns, dirt-streaked, silent. The mistress's face is drawn. The eldest son's hands tremble slightly when he hands you his cloak. You help unpack. You stow the offerings that remain. No one mentions what was given. You don't ask, but when you wash the linens from the cart, you find a strip of cloth missing a corner. The same pattern the boy brought. You fold what's left. You press it flat, you place it back in the trunk where sacred things go, and you never speak of it again. The family returns, but something in them doesn't. You feel it in the rhythm of their footsteps, the weight in their words, the way they stare into the fire for too long without blinking. Whatever happened during the journey to that sacred place, whatever was offered, it left a mark. You're not told what was sacrificed. No one explains the stain on the edge of the mistress's cloak, or why the eldest son winces every time he passes the hearth. But you've learned to read what people don't say. And here, silence speaks louder than any story. They don't mention the gods. Not once. Not during meals. Not during work. Not even in the soft mutterings that sometimes drift from the eldest daughter's corner as she spins. You'd expect prayers, or praise, or even complaints. Instead, the house holds its breath, as if naming what happened might wake something that's better left sleeping. But life doesn't stop. It can't. The fields still need tilling. The goats still cry for food. You go back to your tasks with a kind of gratitude. Not for the labor, but for the way it keeps your hands busy while your mind tries not to wonder. You stir the porridge slower. You patch the holes in the roof with more care than usual. You don't ask where the youngest son went. You don't need to. The family has set a bowl at his place each night since they returned. And every morning, it's still full. There's comfort in the repetition, in the scrape of wooden spoons, the slap of laundry against a stone, the feel of warm water soaking into wool. These things are real, tangible, answerable. They make sense in a way that sacred offerings and blood rites never can. You lean into them. You let the days blend. Not quickly, not all at once, but in small, steady ways. A trickle of meltwater near the barn. Buds swelling on the edge of bare branches. Chickens laying more. Flies returning. The longhouse smells different now. More like life than survival. It's subtle, but it's there. And you notice, you're told to prepare the longhouse for a gathering. A spring feast, though that word feels too light for what it actually is. A show of status. A way to prove the household still stands strong despite the winter's trials. Guests will come. Distant kin, neighbors, perhaps a wandering seer. The mistress has already begun sorting the best tunics. You help scrub floors, boil mead, polish spoons until your knuckles ache. This is your least favorite kind of work. Not because it's hard, but because of what it invites, eyes. Judgment people walking through your space like they own it. Which, to be fair, they often do. You'll be expected to serve, silently and quickly, never drawing attention. Never letting your expressions slip. No matter how foolish the guests become with drink, you've done it before. You'll do it again. The day arrives. The longhouse is filled with laughter, clanking, the rich scent of roasted meat. You work without pause. Serving, cleaning, replacing, listening. You hear stories from other valleys. Rumors of raids along the coast. Someone boasts about finding amber in a stream. Another talks about a priest who caught a cold after mocking the gods. You smile politely. You keep moving. The girl thrall sticks close to you that night. She's scared of the noise, the crowd, the men who stare too long at nothing in particular. You keep her near, handing her tasks. They keep her hands full and her eyes lowered. She doesn't ask questions, but you feel her small fingers brush yours when she thinks no one is watching. It's not fear, it's seeking comfort. You squeeze gently in return. Later, as the fire dims and the mead begins to settle in bellies, someone starts a story, a long one, full of names and half-true histories. It's about a woman who disguised herself as a man to join a raiding ship. She fought 3 battles, lost 2 fingers, and stole a golden ring from a Frankish prince. The guests cheer. One man claps loudly, sloshing his drink. You don't cheer, but you tuck the story away in the back of your mind. You'll remember it later, maybe whisper it to the girl on a quiet day, altering it just enough to make her smile. As the guests begin to drift off to their bedrolls, you clean, quietly, efficiently, you scrape plates, you douse the fire's edge, you hang cloaks to dry near the embers. The house exhales slowly. The storm of voices what's left is warmth, and crumbs, and the gentle breath of sleeping bodies, curled in corners. You don't sleep yet. Not just yet. You walk outside. The night is clear. The stars press close. You breathe the air, sharp, but no longer cruel. Somewhere in the barn, a goat snorts in its sleep. The wind rustles the straw. You feel something ease inside you. Not joy, not even peace. Just quiet. The kind that means you've made it through another day. You sit on the stone step and close your eyes. You think about the offering that was made. Whatever it was, you think about the visitor with the hood, the boy with the cloth, the silence that followed. You don't try to understand it, you just carry it. Like water, like firewood, like memory. In the morning, you'll rise again. You'll feed the goats. You'll sweep the floor. You'll take the leftover meat and boil it into syrup. The guests will leave. The house will return to its shape, and you'll remain. Part of it, behind it, beneath it. The hands that hold it up, unseen. And maybe, just maybe, the gods noticed, or maybe not. Either way, you'll keep going. The guests leave quietly, no fanfare, no ceremony, just the creak of carts rolling back down the muddy track and the sharp call of a raven perched on the gatepost. You stand by the doorway with a broom in hand, watching the last of the wheels vanish behind the trees. The longhouse exhales again, this time deeper. What remains is a kind of stillness you've come to know well. The kind that follows noise, the hush, after laughter, the soft silence that lets you return to your place. You clean for hours, crumbs under benches, grease on the table, ale stains on the floor that soak into your knees as you scrub them. It's thankless, but also predictable, and there's comfort in that. You don't need to think. You don't need to speak. You just move, cloth in hand, mind adrift. The girl helps, humming a low tune that sounds like wind through dry grass. She says it's a lullaby her mother used to sing. You don't ask more. The melody is enough. By late afternoon, the house feels like itself again. The fire is steady. The cloaks are back on their pegs. The benches are swept. The chaos has passed. The eldest son sits sharpening a blade, his motions slow, practiced, mechanical. The mistress sits by the hearth, weaving. Her hands move quickly, but her eyes are distant, fixed somewhere past the flames. You've seen her like this before. After illness, after bad news, she's not broken. Elsewhere. You're given one final task before sleep. Wash the evening bowls. It's always yours. This ritual, the last act of the day. You dip them into warm water, tinged with herbs, scrubbing gently, careful not to chip the edges. You stack them one by one, dried and clean, and place them where they'll wait for morning. That moment, placing the last bowl, always brings a strange brief sense of completion. A pause, a breath before everything begins again. The others sleep, slowly, one by one. The eldest son first. The younger daughter curls in a blanket like a cat. The mistress eventually lies down without a word. The fire dims, the coals breathe soft red light, and the house enters its quietest hour. You know it well. You've lived hundreds of these nights. The way the wind presses against the door like an old friend, the creak of beams as they settle deeper into the cold, the soft, rhythmic breathing of people who've forgotten you're still awake. This is when you move freely, not out of rebellion, but necessity. You check the animals, you bank the fire, you listen, not just for danger, for rhythm, for signs, for the small details that keep the whole machine from falling apart. You're not the heart of the house, but you're something like its pulse. You step outside just once, letting the door close softly behind you. The air is cool, not sharp. The stars are clear tonight. You can see the slope of the land, the dark line of the forest, the silhouette of the barn, where the goats huff in their sleep. The wind carries the faint smell of earth, new grass, and something else. A hint of smoke, maybe. From another house, with another thrall doing the same thing you are. You don't feel alone. Not exactly, but you do feel unseen. You could walk into the woods right now, vanish between the birches, and no one would notice until morning. And even then, it would take them time. A meal missed, a chore, undone. Then the realization, something's out of place. But by then, you'd be gone. You don't walk, but you think about it. You return to your mat. It's near the door, as always, drafty, but you've made it yours. You tuck the blanket under your chin and curl toward the hearth. You close your eyes. The last thing you hear is the crack of the log splitting in the fire, soft. Fanel like the world agreeing to pause for a little while. Sleep comes quickly. In the dream, you're not here. You're in a different house, one with bright walls and windows that look out over the sea. There's bread, warm and fresh, a seat by the fire. No shouting, no orders, just light. You don't speak in the dream, but no one needs you to. They just let you be. It feels strange, but good. You wake before dawn, as always. You don't rise immediately. You lie still, feeling the stiffness in your spine, the weight in your hands. You listen to the fire's low hum, the breath of the others. Then you sit up, slowly, quietly, the way you always do. You step outside. The sun hasn't risen yet, but the sky is silvering. A pale blue stretches across the horizon, promising a clear day. You breathe it in, you roll your shoulders, you begin again. You draw water, you feed the goats, you light the fire. You move like part of the house, like a hinge, like a beam. The girl joins you after a while, rubbing her eyes, carrying a pail. She doesn't speak, she just begins. That's the rhythm here. Not words, but motion. Not thanks, but doing. You both know it. Later, as the mistress wakes and begins giving instructions, the world begins to spin again. You fall into place without being called. It's not submission, it's not even habit. It's just life. Repeated, carried, endured. You scrape porridge into bowls, you wipe the table, you gather wool for spinning. The morning unspools like a familiar thread, and you follow it. And somehow, in that thread, in that repetition, you find something close to peace. Not joy, not freedom, but something quieter. Something real. You don't dream about freedom as much as you used to. There was a time when it was constant, a low flicker behind your eyes, even during chores. A fantasy that walked with you as you carried water, folded wool, or mended boots. You'd picture it in fragments. The sound of birds without orders behind them. A warm crust of bread you didn't have to earn. Sleep that came without worry. But lately, it comes less, not because you've stopped wanting it, but because you've stopped expecting it. And in that quiet resignation, there's a strange sort of steadiness. You begin to think of endurance not as suffering, but as something you do well. The old thrall says that if you survive long enough, you earn a second kind of life. He doesn't mean freedom, he means obscurity, the kind where no one bothers you anymore because you become part of the furniture, familiar and dependable, harmless. He says that when they stop looking at you like a tool and start looking past you entirely, it's like being invisible, he says. But warmer? You believe him. You're starting to feel it. The family barely speaks to you unless they need something. You're not scolded, you're not praised, you're not really seen. But they never question where you are either. They just know you'll be there. The bread is already started. The bucket's already full. The ashes swept. The cows calmed. They don't realize how many problems you solved before they even notice they exist. And honestly, you don't need them to. You've stopped chasing approval. Now, you chase silence. There's a rhythm to your day that feels almost sacred. You wake, you move, you mend, you cook, you feed, you wait. And through all of it, there's something steady in your chest. A soft drumbeat that says, keep going, keep going, keep going. It's not poetic, it's not proud, but it's yours. You've begun teaching the girl thrall some of what you know, not because anyone asked you to, and certainly not because they'd approve. Just because someone should. She's learning quickly. How to braid rope so it holds, how to turn spoiled milk into usable cheese, how to tell if firewood is still too green to burn. She listens better than most adults. You like that about her? She doesn't talk to fill silence. She talks when it means something. One morning, you're shelling barley together, and she asks, "What happens when we get old?" You blink, then smile. "We just get slower," she nods. And then, you don't answer right away. Not because you don't know, but because the truth is, nothing happens. No great retirement, no reward, no firelit goodbye. You just get slower until you can't keep up. And then, if they're kind, they let you sit by the hearth and peel roots. If they're not, you're replaced. Quietly, swiftly. You don't say that. You just say, "Then we tell stories." She likes that answer. And so do you. Even if it's not true yet. You think sometimes about what kind of story your life would make. Not the kind with a hero. Not the kind with revenge or romance or a grand twist. Just a slow one. A story where nothing remarkable happens, but someone listens anyway. The kind of tale told during long winters. Not for excitement, but for comfort, for rhythm, for warmth. Historians still argue whether thralls in Norse society could earn their freedom through service. Some sources say it was possible, that a lifetime of good work could result in manumission, a new name, a small patch of land. Others say it was rare, more fantasy than fact. You've stopped waiting for that day, but not because you've given up hope. You've just changed what you hope for. Now, you hope for soft evenings, for quiet fires, for full bellies and empty complaints. You hope the goats stay healthy, that the girl doesn't get sent away when she grows, that the old man lives through one more winter, so you won't be alone when the fire dies at night. You hope no one notices how deeply you understand everything, because to them, understanding means danger. Better they think you're slow. You're not slow, you're tired, but you're here. One evening, during the lull between stew and sweeping, the mistress walks past you and, without stopping, says, "You've done well." That's it, for words. No eye contact, no smile, no gesture, just passing breath in a long hallway of silence. But the words land like something heavy, something sacred. You feel them in your ribs, in your fingertips. You don't smile, you don't react, but you carry it with you for the rest of the night. You let it echo inside you. You've done well. It's the first kindness in months, maybe years. Later that night, you sit by the fire with the girl. She's threading bone buttons onto a cord, and you're darning a sock so riddled with holes, it's almost lace. You tell her the story of the woman who sailed to Iceland, disguised as a man. She listens with wide eyes, nodding when appropriate. When you finish, she says, "I want to be her." You nod. Maybe you will. She shakes her head. No boats here. You glance toward the door, then toward the sea. Too far to see, but always there. Maybe not yet. You both fall silent. The fire crackles. The night is cold, but inside, everything is warm, not happy. You lie down on your mat and let your breath slow. One hand over your stomach, one leg curled toward the hearth. You listen to the wind outside, the breath of the animals in the barn, the slow ticking of the night pressing forward, and before sleep comes, you whisper, not a prayer, not a wish, just a fact. You are still here. And somehow, that's enough. The seasons turn, as they always do. Spring deepens, spills into summer. The cold that once clawed at your toes becomes a distant memory, replaced by sweat between your shoulder blades and the itch of grass against your ankles. Everything changes, but not you, not your work. You move through it like a shadow that never rests, always just behind the heat, just before the silence. There is planting to finish, fish to smoke, wool to card. Nothing new, and yet it all feels heavier. Somehow, not from difficulty, but from duration. The weight of days, stacked on days. The mistress becomes quieter as the sun rises higher each week. She no longer scolds when you forget something. Not that you often do. She no longer praises either. She just watches, as though looking through you into the work itself. You think, maybe, she's started to understand something. That you're not just labor, your rhythm, your memory, made muscle. Without you, the house would still stand, but it would have grown more. The hearth would dim faster. The buckets would crack before anyone noticed they were dry. One afternoon, the daughter hands you a cup of water without being asked. Just sets it down beside you while you scrub the floor, then walks away. You don't drink it right away. You stare at it, cool, clear, in a clean cup, and wonder if it means anything. Probably not. But maybe it's a seed of recognition, even if no one says it aloud. You sip. It tastes like nothing and everything all at once. You've stopped dreaming of leaving, not because you've accepted this life as final, but because you've started to see that all lives are made of repetitions. Even the lives of those above you. The daughter will marry. The sons will inherit a piece of land and argue about whose field is broader. The mistress will one day be the elder who sits by the hearth, and someone else will sweep for her. Everyone is trapped in cycles. Yours is just tighter, closer to the dirt. The girl thrall follows you everywhere now, not out of duty, but habit. She walks like you, notices things the way you taught her to. The tension in the rope by the well, the spot on the roof, where leaks form first, the way a goat's cough means more than just dust. You're proud of her, in your own way, but deeply. When she fixes the churn without being told, or mends a shoe before it splits wide, you catch yourself smiling. Just a little, just for a moment. One evening, you hear the old man coughing in his sleep. It's a sound you've heard before, growing harsher each week, like something inside him has turned brittle. You rise, gently, lay another log on the fire, then sit beside him for a while. You don't wake him, you don't speak, you just sit. Being there is sometimes the only thing a person needs. When he stops coughing, you return to your place near the door. The night presses close, but you don't mind. You think about your name, the real one, not the sound the family uses when they need you to fetch something, the one you haven't heard in years. You say it to yourself sometimes when no one is listening, just to feel it, just to remember who you are underneath all this. It doesn't sound strange, even now. It sounds like soil, like river water, like something that still belongs. Historians often debate the inner world of people like you, thralls, servants, the invisible. They ask what you believed, what you feared, what you hoped. They write in past tense, with careful distance, measuring lives like facts on a page. You think about that as you gut fish by the stream, watching the silver scales drift into the current. You think, we are not gone. We are still here, still breathing, still stitching the world together from underneath. You look at the house and realize it sounds better than its owners. You know how the third plank creaks underweight? How the shutter rattles when the wind comes from the north? You know where the bees like to gather under the eaves? You know when the goats will give birth, when the chickens will molt, when the well is about to run dry. This is your kingdom, though no one calls it that. You don't need a title. You just need the knowing. The girl asks you if you think she'll always live here. You answer slowly. Maybe she waits. Then, would that be bad? You pause again, wiping your hands on your apron. Not if you know what to look for. She doesn't understand yet, but she will. With time, with patience, with stories, you'll make sure of it. The fields hum with insects. The animals are fat and lazy in the sun. The fire burns slowly. The bread rises without complaint. You move through the day like a river. Not fast, not loud, just constant. You feel your body changing. Your joints ache more. Your fingers don't grip as You drop a pot once and freeze, waiting for the shout. It doesn't come. The mistress looks over, frowns, then turns back to her weaving. No one says a word. You sweep up the shards, slowly, carefully, and carry them outside. You bury them near the compost heap like bones. You wonder if the gods remember you. If the fire at Uppsala ever flickered in time with your breath. If the trees that watched your offerings also whispered your name. Maybe. Maybe not. But as you watch the sun sink behind the barn and feel the day slide into stillness, you think, I remember me. And that might be enough. That night, you lie on your mat and close your eyes. The wind slips through the cracks in the wall, cool and soft. The fire breathes low and steady. You feel the pulse of the house around you, the weight of sleep pressing down on every beam. You are still here, still useful, still breathing, still remembering. And in the morning, you'll rise again. Let's rest here, now. Let the work fall away. Let the cold wind outside the longhouse soften into a distant hush. You've done enough today. You've mended, carried, endured. You've kept the fire warm and the floor swept. And the story's moving forward. You've stayed quiet when silence was needed, and spoken only when the words mattered. There is a rhythm to all things, even to this life you never chose. Feel the stillness around you. The animals have curled into sleep. The girl you helped has settled beside the hearth. The old man breathes, slow and shallow, wrapped in wool. Nothing asks anything of you now. Not the fire, not the fields, not the gods. You are here, in the quiet. You are here, in the breath between days. Not forgotten, not erased, simply unseen. And sometimes, that's the safest place to be. Close your eyes. Let the weight of your limbs soften into the earth. Let the last heat from the embers ease into your bones. You are safe. You are still. You are part of something older than stories. The quiet labor that holds the world together. Sleep now. Quietly. Sleep now. Deeply. Sleep now, and dream only of silence.